Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Street's second installment of what we're now calling Technically Speaking, our new tech podcast with all the tech columnists and editors at TheStreet's.com. Joining us today, we've got Chris Nolter, the Street and the Deals telecom and tech reporter.
Hey, Nelson, TGIF.
Yep, excited for it to be Friday. And we've got a special guest, Brian Sazi, our executive editor.
By NVIDIA and Microsoft, two Action Alerts Plus holdings, and they do tech stuff.
Tell us how you really feel, Brian.
Well, that's all I got left for you, kid.
And of course, we've got Eric Johnson, our tech columnist extraordinaire out in San Diego. How's everything going out there, Eric?
Pretty good.
All right, excellent. So tons of tech news this week. One of the biggest was some of the developments with Broadcom and Qualcomm. So a lot of deal machinations to that. Chris, can you give us a little bit of a summary of what happened this week in this multifaceted deal?
Well, sure. Qualcomm dealt with one of its biggest antagonists by upping its offer for NXP, which gets Elliott management off their backs. But they still have to deal with Broadcom, hostile suitor, which actually lowered its bid for Qualcomm after it agreed to buy NXP.
Right. So they're fighting a war on two fronts, it's like.
Yeah, well, and then they've got the shareholder meeting coming up in March 6th, and that's a big date. And we had thought that might be actually kind of an end date for this dispute. But, ISS recommended that shareholders give Broadcom 4 seats on Qualcomm's board. So, I mean, if that happens, Broadcom doesn't get enough directors to control the board, but they could stick around for a while.
Right. So they're not obligated to vote the same way that Broadcom wants them to.
They vote however they want. Right.
Eric, you wrote a great piece this week looking at the sort of financials of the deal, and you kind of argued that the deal still makes sense, even though Broadcom has actually lowered its offer for Qualcomm. What do you think happens from here? What happens on March 6th?
I think, the fact that Broadcom lowered its bid, could make some Qualcomm investors think twice, just given the regulatory risks that exist. But from Broadcom's standpoint, there's still a lot of, it still makes a lot of sense, just given the tons of free cash flow they could generate if they were able to acquire both Qualcomm and NXP. And it really wouldn't surprise me that much if Broadcom decided to raise its bid again. I think the main reason why they lowered their bid by $3 a share is the amount of debt they already have to take on to finance this deal is incredible. And with the revised NXP deal, it would have just been, might have been too much to offer $60 per share in cash, as they previously were offering. Right. So now they lowered the cash portion to $57, and they're offering $22 in stock.
Right. So, Eric, you think that people might be overlooking the fact that these combined companies could be generating a lot of cash flow that would reduce the amount of debt that's needed for this deal to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, I think if the deal was to happen, it probably wouldn't close before mid-2019, given all the regulatory reviews, and that would give Broadcom, Qualcomm, and NXP a fair amount of time to produce additional free cash flow that Broadcom could later use to help pay down the cash portion of the deal. They'd still be taking off on a ton of debt, but there would be a roadmap, maybe in 5 years and 6 years to pay down most of it.
Yeah, Chris has been doing phenomenal work. Eric, you've been doing phenomenal work. And for me, I only have to add a bunch of theater here. From a trading perspective, I would be inclined to trade Qualcomm. I think Qualcomm has regained the upper hand in this battle. Just my sense of it. I think Broadcom and Hock Tan, he seemed like the mastermind. I think he made a couple missteps here. Just my sense of the whole thing. But you know who's earning their pay? Joel Frank, the PR firm that is helping Broadcom. Every day I'm getting emails from this company, and I'm getting tired of it. It's getting really annoying. They really need to get this deal done. Hock Tan, I mean, have we seen any pictures from him other than looking really serious out there on the internet?
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of a guy playing, poker on the World Series or something.
Does he smile? I mean, I don't think he does. He seems like an okay guy. I don't know. But anyway, I think you got to go long Qualcomm here. I'm a little concerned that Broadcom might ultimately overpay for a Qualcomm. I think they're getting lured in.
Right. Well, talking about some of the PR that's involved here, Chris wrote a piece yesterday about how Qualcomm's, doing its own kind of PR battle here.
Right. They're kind of hammering on a number of themes. I mean, one of them is the bid, attacking the bid. The other one is regulatory risk. They keep playing that up. And, Broadcom also, or Qualcomm also rather, had a video yesterday of its board members. It kind of seems like a charm offensive.
That's so goofy.
To tell its shareholders, look, here are our guys. They're smart, thoughtful people. You don't want to vote these guys out, do you? We've got another couple of weeks, so I wonder how much more material they have.
Nelson, you and I put this question too. We had Stephen Mollenkopf, the CEO of Qualcomm, in here literally a couple months before this whole, what hit the fan.
Right.
What was your sense of him? I think he's a very polished guy. He's a very technically oriented guy, but I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, he's an engineer who came up through the ranks, and that's really the way he reads and comes across. And I do remember he had those really fancy Prada sunglasses.
Yeah, he's a spiffy dude. I mean, he's making a nice couple bucks, so I think he's doing okay for himself.
Great. So I wanted to turn to talking about another piece of big news that sort of straddled the tech and retail worlds, which was Walmart's earnings, which seemed to be pretty impacted by Amazon. So Walmart, beat on some measures, but their earnings missed, and the big thing was that they reported e-commerce growth was slowing pretty dramatically, and their stock fell 10%. What's your take on that, Brian?
We've had a couple chances already to sit down with Walmart CEO Doug McMillon. Before the holiday season, I caught up with him at the National Retail Federation before he gave his speech. He is going to make tough choices. Some of the things investors may not like what he's going to do, but he realized this is a long-term game. He has to take down Amazon. And yes, that's going to come at the expense of profits, but he has to do what he has to do. From an investment standpoint, I want to see, I think Walmart's the only company that can successfully take on Amazon. It's going to come at a price. Ultimately, I think, what else can you do?
Is M&A going to be involved in that?
I think he is going to. He told me the companies he's interested in are companies that make mom's life easier. So I'm thinking meal kits. I think you could go out there and buy a Blue Apron. I think that's very realistic. And while we're on this topic too, there was a report floating around that Mark Lohr, the founder of Jet.com, who Walmart swallowed up, is going to leave. That is BS. He is not leaving. I think Mark Lohr and Doug McMillon are besties. They're joined at the hip. They want to see the company ultimately succeed. Mark Lohr is not going anywhere. You heard it first on this podcast.
Eric, you've been a little bit more skeptical about Walmart's ability to compete with Amazon. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, I think the big issue is that Amazon's scale has grown to such a point where it's just a massive competitive advantage. It's a massive moat relative to every smaller rival. Walmart, of course, has a giant fulfillment infrastructure, but much of it's optimized for bricks and mortar retail rather than online. Everything Amazon's been doing has been optimized for online retail. And, they have such a huge base of Amazon Prime subscribers now. And a lot of people use Prime, just go to Amazon's website, don't bother looking anywhere else for a lot of standard purchases.
That's a real
acceleration.
Eric, that's a real great point. And our Kinsey Grant just did a feature on Amazon on Thursday looking at the potential for government regulation. So she talked to a bunch of antitrust lawyers. She really dove into it, and it's getting kind of scary. I mean, Amazon's tentacles are everywhere, and how ruthless they've become in prices is starting to creep me out. But I encourage everybody to go and check out that piece on The Street.
Yeah, that's the big long-term risk, I feel, is that regulators could take a closer look at Amazon. But, until that happens, they've got such a big scale advantage. Combine that with their brand, with their customer support, just the reputation they have. It makes it very difficult for any smaller scale rival, whether it's Walmart or eBay or anyone else, to really compete against Amazon head on. They can focus on some niches where, a company can differentiate. eBay is good at a lot of long tail stuff and a lot of collectibles and vintage goods, things like that. Walmart has its grocery business where you can order online, pick up in stores, and that's a growth area for them. But competing against Amazon head on is very tough.
Eric, do you think there's anybody big enough or good enough out there that Walmart could acquire that could help it compete with Amazon?
It's tough to say. I mean, I guess eBay is still always out there. Their stock recently shot higher after a good earnings report. I don't know if there's any, particular retail. Obviously, they bought Jet.com, in hopes of catering more to millennials and to higher income urban consumers. But that's only gotten them so far. And now they're warning that Jet's growth is going to slow. So I can't really think of any like one big retailer they can buy that would just be a game changer for them.
Right.
I got one. Macy's. Ironically, when we sat down with McMillan in December, I guess it's no longer off the record. But anyway, he was meeting with Macy's CEO. So immediately that sparked my interest. Walmart is an acquirer of brands. They want to buy brands. They want to buy companies that people have heard of and that they can scale up very quickly. Macy's doesn't fit all those characteristics, but it's a well-known brand. Macy's, I believe, is the second largest online player behind Amazon. That certainly interests me. And I don't think there would be a lot of antitrust or competitive concerns there because they're just two totally different companies, believe it or not.
All right, you heard it here first.
Macy's, baby.
Macy's. All right, so the last topic I wanted to turn to was Snap, which surprisingly reported a pretty good quarter recently, and its stock popped on that. But lately, it's been getting a lot of heat for its redesign, and including from probably its most famous user, Kylie Jenner, who tweeted that she wasn't loving the redesign, and the stock subsequently dropped 7 or 8% yesterday. Brian, any thoughts on Snap?
Well, I wanted to put it to Chris, actually. Do you think Snap's an acquisition target here?
I think they are, but I think they have to. I'm not sure at what level they become one. I'm not sure how much they have to do.
Sure.
In terms of proving this redesign.
Mm-hmm. Who would be a buyer? Who would be interested in them?
I could see.
You think a lot about the sort of giant companies like a Google or They have a social
Google
or retail. Getting into retail, why wouldn't a retail want to scoop up Snap?
The other question is always Verizon, because they've been bolting on digital businesses. They've been AOL. Yahoo, and they have goals to really build their audience and their revenues from those digital businesses. But Verizon has really been a value shopper.
Sure.
And so Snap costs a lot less than it did a little while ago. Mm-hmm. But that's something to keep in mind with Verizon.
Nelson, too, I'll throw it to you. What do you think about Evan Spiegel? Me personally, I've been very critical of him. I think he's a terrible CEO, and I think he needs to hand it off to an adult.
Yeah, that may be where they're at right now. I've heard some similar things. He comes across as pretty confident, which I was kind of impressed. I listened to the Goldman Sachs tech conference call recently, and he's fairly low key, like despite what you might think, and he's kind of measured, but clearly the company is not doing that well, and it remains to be seen, whether he can kind of turn things around. Mm-hmm. Eric, do you have any? What are your thoughts on Snap's redesign and the furor over that? I know last week you were skeptical that it was going to have much of an impact. What do you feel now?
Yeah, they recently pushed it out to me on the Android app, and I can understand why some people are a little bothered by it. Because when you swipe to the publisher section they've created, the accounts that a user follows don't necessarily stand out. There's just a bookmark icon pointing out which publisher stories are from accounts that users already follow. So it's probably worth tweaking that for them, so that the followed accounts are segmented from all the other stuff. But that's not too hard of a thing to do. I think they can just take once they react to some of this criticism, they'll make a change along those lines. And after that, I think the backlash will die down.
Are you a heavy Snapchat user, Eric?
I'm not a big Snapchat user. I use it from time to time, and I feel like the redesign is, the criticism's been a little overblown. It's still not that hard to do the main things. Only somewhat hard part is just finding some of the followed accounts on the publisher side right now.
All right. Well, that sounds like a good note to end on. Thanks all for joining us. Chris Noelter, Brian Sazi, Eric Janza, and Nelson Wong. I'm the tech editor at The Street. Thanks for listening to Technically Speaking. Talk to you next week.